Welcome to this virtual session for the UC Summit sponsored by UK Today for the year 2021. It's really good to be in front of all of my friends over there in the UK and Europe today. I do miss traveling, but we know that we have to be distant at this point, and I'm excited to share some learnings and insights that I've been able to gain from multiple roundtables that I've had with CEOs, CIOs, CRMs, VPs, all levels of the technology organization and business organizations in Europe over the last 9 months while we've been working from home. So I do appreciate you joining me today, and with that, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Curtis Peterson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Global Operations for RingCentral. I am based at our headquarters in California, but I am currently holed up in my home in the middle of Texas in Austin for the COVID and for the duration of this. This is my home office. I think everybody today understands that the new way of work is going to be much more like this than what we were used to prior to the COVID. Speaking of, let's just take a minute here and go back. Think about where we were last year, in person, presenting on stage, fireside chats. We were doing breakout sessions. We were talking a lot about digital transformation. And I just remember so many of you were going, what does that really mean? It's an overused word. And I think we came to an understanding that as kludgy as the word digital transformation might be, it did sum up what we needed to be doing in our businesses for the future. And a lot of us were looking at the amount of work it took to change our entire institution, all of the tools we'd spent years deploying, the actual culture change that it requires in the business, the decision making from the top being able to flow down and support these digital transformation efforts. It was a large task. A lot of us put out 5-10-year timelines. And the fact was, just at the pace of business today, we could no longer wait 10 years to do digital transformation. So last time we were talking about, accelerating this 10 down to 5, 3, maybe even 2 years. Well, early March rolled around, and everything changed basically overnight. We went from these 3 and 5 year plans that were super accelerated, almost impossible to do, to being in a position that we needed to support our businesses in a digitally transformed way overnight, within a week. It's unbelievable how far we've come since the beginning of this. A lot of the colleagues out there in the C-level positions even noticed, at least in the knowledge industry, productivity increases. I also got feedback from people in other industries, more of the industries where the workers are frontline workers, essential workers. So your grocery stores, your warehouses, your delivery and infrastructure people. And they had massive digital transformation in their world as well. What used to be a meeting, for example, in a store where you would bring your employees together in the room and give them the daily brief was now being spread over TVs or spread over personal devices like mobile phones or tablets, where people could absorb that information remotely and not in close contact with others. So it's not just knowledge workers that change, it's really the whole stack that's been going through there. We started to learn pretty quickly that our employees were not fully enabled to do everything they needed to do with work. Sure, a lot of us got by and a lot of us were able to get the tools out there and support our businesses and efforts to continue moving forward. I can tell you from our own experience, our IT team for RingCentral has been absolutely outstanding. We have hardly missed a beat going through this pandemic, and they have provided all the service and support which they used to do in an office at a couple of locations. now spread all over the globe, 6,000 plus employees all over the globe. So we understand the logistics and the issues to go with this, but were we really ready? We still had a lot of customers out there and people we've been talking to that still had premise-based systems in their architecture, whether it was some legacy systems for a few groups, whether it was some apps we hadn't been able to migrate to the public cloud yet. There was a long list of these applications, processes, and people that needed to be able to pull away from the business environment and work remotely and work from home. Not just so we could be productive, but for those persons could continue to work and enjoy what work brings in their life. We also went through a period of time where we realized the security threats with our tools were really serious. And previously, video, chat, other mediums, we probably were a little okay that a little incident would happen every now and then. That's what happens in the video world. That's what happens in the chat world. But as we moved our businesses completely into the environment of non-stop video meetings, no longer was it acceptable that those were unencrypted, that keys floated through foreign countries, that you could be bombed in any of your video meetings at any notice whatsoever. So we weren't really around the corner on security quite yet. I think we also needed to improve a little bit around our mobility options. I think it was pretty easy to grab your laptop and flee, but what if you weren't able to grab it? Were you able to connect in with your home computer? Were you able to use a tablet, an iPad, an Android, an iPhone? So lots of things along there. We did notice that the cloud held up pretty well during this transition. So the capacity issues and concerns that were present in the last decade or so, conversations we'd have very seriously with our prospects coming onto our platform, seems to have been largely avoided at this point in time. We always are vigilant in our capacity and will be going forward. And we ask our customers to look at capacity and capacity planning, both through the lens of what does my business look like today? What does it look like if it has an internal crisis it needs to manage, or when there's an external crisis like the pandemic? But again, a lot of our apps weren't integrated. Some companies only had email to communicate, or a scattering of different tools. One group would be in one application, another group would be in another application. We did suffer some quality on calling and video. Most of this was not related to the broadband for a single person in a household, but as we retreated into our homes and our children started attending school remotely, and our spouses started attending and working remotely, and we were working remotely, now we had 2, 3, maybe even 4 simultaneous video and audio calls going on. Our network started to get congested at the edge. We had to have solutions that could really address that type of network changes as the pandemic rolled out. There was some significant downtime with some major players out there. We know most of those are recovered at this point, and we're glad that that worked out. But as a full reminder here, a cloud delivery platform still requires businesses, still requires you guys to put together a full and comprehensive business continuity plan that supersedes any one tool. It's complicated to solve all this. App overload is totally in there as well. We bombarded our users with a lot of apps just to get us through. And now we really have a large breadth of the issue. It was the whole organization we impacted during this, and not just what was the pandemic, just the tools and how we changed our digital transformation overnight. Certainly all employees were affected, but the business itself was affected too. Our OpEx spending, how we generate our revenues, how we looked at our businesses and things along those lines really drove a lot of conversation around how should a communications platform really look in a post-pandemic world. The last one were just technical challenges. Some of them were hard to do. A lot of our technical challenges we still traditionally solve by hands-on. And we have done almost exclusively remote support at this point, as you can imagine. So what's it like if we don't solve some of these problems that we've been talking about, that we experienced as we rolled out the tools we had, what we were able to put together for the pandemic? We see rising costs in operations. We see some people with great remote access, some people with limits. I talked to a CIO with a company that only had so many VPN licenses for their users that users had to trade their licenses between shifts in order to maintain connectivity until they could contact the vendor and obtain more. I think frighteningly, though, it was slowing down our ability to evolve as businesses. Some thrived in this environment, others did not, and we're having to go back and relook at how they do innovation inside there. I think we could put a whole list of these together, and I'm only going to talk about the top few there, but I want to leave one that was really important here. Poor employee engagement. Think about in the last 9 months how many people you have added to your organization or have a different role in your organization today than they did before. Think of the people in your organization who might be very intelligent but might not necessarily contain the emotional IQ when they're in the business workplace. And when you take them and put them home, it becomes awkward and interacting with the employees becomes difficult. We found some solutions out there. We started having wine hour, cocktail hour, video meetings with the whole grid lit up there. But the reality is we were not engaging our employees as much as we needed to. We really needed to be out there checking on employee health. And I don't mean health in the terms of medical health, but employee health in terms of how are they doing mentally? How are they doing with their job? Are the tools affecting how they work? Are they affecting how they operate? Is it interfering with their family life? I think one of the things that came up that highlighted this the most to me was looking at people that were moving their families and their careers back into their homes, and they had purchased homes with this not in sight, with this pandemic and work from home not in sight. They were having to use common space like kitchens and creating studies and putting dividers up in the rooms during the day and dad on one side or mom on the other side, or the children in different places in order to learn, or maybe we shifted a schedule. I think long term though, if we're going to continue, and I believe we're going to continue, a remote work environment post-pandemic, we really need to make sure that we improve employee engagement and checking in on employee health. So having said that, we think right now is the time that a lot of businesses are approaching us and going, we want to look at our solution at large, our entire communication strategy and plan, how we work as a business, how we communicate with each other, how we get productive, how we do video, how we do voice, how we do chat, how do we engage our customers who no longer are really afforded the luxury of interacting with us person on person. What are we replacing those things with? So we think this is a great time to start looking at the post-pandemic reality of how things are going to be working. We don't believe there's going to be a mass return to the buildings, the corporations, the offices, the home locations of major businesses. As people have adjusted and adapted throughout this pandemic, there are going to be remote workers. we probably also are not going to be able to achieve the same worker density and the same tightness of spaces that we did pre-pandemic. So we need to be looking at the ability to support all needs in all environments, both those who are on the road, those that might be traveling, those that might be in other countries, those that might be working from home, and those that come into the office. I think our offices are going to change too. Collaboration space, once we have vaccination and pandemic is behind us, is going to become incredibly important to the business. Every meeting is going to have to be conducted as if someone is probably remote to that meeting. That's a big cultural change for most businesses out there. But we're excited that people are really looking at this and paying attention to it. But look, communications needs to evolve. Today, a scientific survey showed us that 69% of employees waste up to 1 hour each day switching between all the apps they need to do to communicate within their business. This is a substantial impact to user productivity. This is a waste of up to 32 days per year per employee if they use the maximum amount of time of 1 hour. I consider myself an expert at switching apps because I load hundreds and hundreds on my phone because I'm always looking at everything that's out there. And I do realize that as I go through my day, as competent as I believe I am switching through apps, I do spend 15, 20, 30 minutes of that time doing that. So I think we need to really factor in that there's a pretty heavy workload out there related to context switching. The next one, again, how have we worked with customers? How do we engage? We know restaurants have put in takeaway and made that their main line of business. Some restaurants have moved outdoors. Some merchants have gone to delivery only models. Some have gone to customer pickup only models, discouraging this in-person interaction. To do that, though, we need a digital platform that includes all the methods of communication that our customers might be using to reach our businesses. So we found again in our study that 89% of customers said one of the key reasons they repeated business with a particular business, they repeated their loyalty to this business, was due to the fact that they had a great communication experience in the mode and modality in which they had chosen. Whether that was social media, a chat session, it was built into the business's app, whether it was phone, web, voicemail, however it came in, that those were handled in the right way. And if we're going to handle all of those interactions together, we have to have a solution that's totally integrated. We can't be flying all over the place for that. Customer interactions need to be able to be stored in such a way that we can go back in time and look at the history of that engagement with that employee, regardless of how they were engaged. So how did we think about this? So RingCentral spent a lot of time and a lot of years, almost a decade ago, saying, we are going to take a mobile first approach to the world. We're going to design our apps as if everyone was on the go. Now, fortunately, and I believe just because we were in the right place at the right time, that was a great strategy to do. But it's even more important today than it was 10 years ago. We believe there has to be a complete tie-in together between message, video, and phone, or companies are going to lose the ability to work effectively in the new world or the post-pandemic exercise. Messaging is an important part of our business. This is where people are able to chat with each other. It's non-real time, but has histories, has all of our information in there. They really have to be user intuitive. They have to be easy to use. Can't set up big training workshops all the time anymore. Distance learning, things like that become more complicated in these environments. But things we thought were important beyond the normal things of just being able to send somebody some information, we thought that it was important that this be open and have an open API and stack, that it can be integrated into the tools and systems that you already use in your back office. Maybe it's another cloud provider. Maybe it's another app in another cloud. Maybe it's something you still have to run of your own. But being able to build those together is incredibly important. You may have, for example, a case management tool on every customer interaction that can provide information inside a message thread of how the customer is doing. Are they problem solved? Or at a management level, are we handling the call volume the way we need to? Are we handling the inbound social media at the level we need to? And being able to get reports and so forth in a stream with a team of people that we can work with and delegate information and tasks out to. So open integration and being able to really thread the whole message strategy is super important. The next leg we said was video. And we're very excited about video right now. We believe we've come to a point where we're evolving video into much more than just a video meeting. A lot of us have done a lot of video meetings. I know I have. Countless and countless hours back to back, going from meeting to meeting to meeting. One of the things that we realized is meetings aren't just a one-time, one-event item. Meetings have things that happen before the meeting, the pre-meeting activities. It might be finding who are the right participants, identifying an agenda, checking everyone's diaries, scheduling the information at the right time, having the right people engaged when it's time to go into a video or collaboration session. So all of that work can happen before the meeting. Then we get into the video meeting itself. There has to be tools in there as well to make things private behind you, virtual backgrounds. We had to have things in there that made the audio experience and the video experience exceptional for users. The ability for that audio and video to only consume the amount of bandwidth needed for essential services if many people were fighting over the same bandwidth. We had to have admin and user controls so we didn't lose the ability to control meetings. So host controls, the ability to lock the meeting room once people are in, passwords, things along those lines. So a fantastic meeting experience, best in user environment, top-notch video on any device, from any place, mobility, wireless, wired, home, office, the future of our work, hopefully in other places, potentially even in travel, had to be the same. The experience across there had to be the same. Now, what we also found out is once the video meeting ended, once that session ended, whether it was 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, there's always work to do afterwards. So flowing back into our message platform, we're able to post the entire video meeting inside that chat group where people can go back and watch it themselves or pick out the items that they needed to do. We can create a list of follow-up items or tasks. We can assign those tasks to individuals. We can check dates on when they're due. We can also share the conclusions of the meeting at large in this post-meeting environment. Or in a lot of cases, one meeting is just the beginning. There's a whole lot more to go, and there's a continuation and involvement of that particular group. And they need to be able to maintain a history of all that information. And let's go back just a minute for that employee that we onboarded in the middle of the pandemic, who's met almost no one at your company. Think of them coming into and starting to join one of these meeting sessions. They're in a video session. If they can go back to that messaging and video platform and see the history of that team, look at the information that's relevant, take a look at the pinned items or the really important items inside those teams, watch some of the key meetings, absorb some of that information, they're able to catch up and hopefully close a little bit of that gap that we get in the personal interaction. Last but certainly not least in this journey of the MVP, the message, video, and phone, is phone itself. Phone has become super important during this pandemic. Reaching users wherever they might be, whatever device they might be using, we know is done through phone. And An example of this is, things like contact tracing, things like order verification, employment verification. Whenever we're reaching out to other people that aren't in our application ecosystem, the good old telephone, the phone as it would be, is still a very relevant piece of technology in there. We believe we've taken the phone and we've integrated it into this message and video where we can take a phone call, change it to a video call, change it back to a phone call. We can take that same interaction and move it from a mobile device to a desktop back to a mobile device. So again, we're thinking the future of post-pandemic work where people might be on the go, or people might be sometimes in the office, sometimes not in the office. And we're able to handle all of those scenarios with the same tool set and the same message streams that we were operating before. You can't underestimate a unified app experience. Certainly they need to be consistent across all platforms: PC, Mac, web interfaces, Androids, tablets, iPhones. I think at this point this is just an absolute must-have. When you're looking at what you're doing post-pandemic, put a lot of time and effort into looking at how unified is the experience, how easy, intuitive is it to use, are there global search capabilities, are there easy ways to move in, are there tips and hints. These are really important going forward. Not lost in all of this is many of us still had to maintain inbound contact centers where we had mass employees that were able to take calls, emails, or omni-channel events from the greater public. This ability had to be able to be performed remotely. We couldn't do the same types of call centers we did before where we would put dozens or hundreds of people into small rooms. We had to be able to work on that remotely. So the tools that they needed to be able to be self-installed, had to be portable, had to be workable from any location, and had to still deliver high quality. As you're looking into this going forward, you also need to be thinking, are the analytics good enough for me to run a business unit? My line of business owner will be happy with me in order to manage a business unit, even if I don't see that business unit for months on end. That's a great question. I think and one that we should look a lot at, especially in the contact center space. We also have plenty of need for outbound contact center. This is new in a way. It's been around for a while. Of course, there's robocalling and things that are illicit inside this business, but there are very legitimate reasons for doing outbound contacting. Contact tracing comes to mind, but there's other things, vaccination readiness, employee notifications to make sure that they're widely distributed. So having an outbound contact center side to your strategy of communications, I think, is one that we need to put back on the list of, is it important to our strategy? Did we overlook it the first few times around? Is it an opportunity to bring this in and integrate it into our system? The last one is, people are just contacting us from anywhere and everywhere now. That's not going to go away after the pandemic. If we stood up temporary, or we patched together some solutions where we could handle Facebook, Twitter, Messenger, Instagram, however it may be, 30 plus digital channels, 20 plus digital channels, then we know we need a solution going forward where those aren't separated from the rest of our contact center organization or our customer interaction. Whether we engage with somebody in a social medium, whether we engage with them over a phone call, whether we engage with them in email, or even with a picture, then we need to make sure that the history of that information is stored in a way that we can serve that customer or serve those businesses the same going forward. I want to thank you very much for your time, and I hope in the very near future that we're going to be able to have these conversations in person, in real events. But in the meantime, please stay safe, and I look forward to an exciting and new 2021.